First of all, I may tell you that perhaps this time round, the government of Pakistan has not made or has not sent the best, and because there were many other better candidates than myself. But in any case, I'm glad that today I'm here, and thank you for inviting me to this prestigious institute and speaking to this distinguished audience. I'm really honored and humbled. We all know that Pakistan and India are in a very complex relationship, and this complexity stems from history, geography, and so many other dependent and independent variables. Thus, talking about crafting a new paradigm is not without its inherent hazards, because what I have seen in the last 3-4 months during my stay in India, both our countries at times, build hype and euphoria around single events, and then we also encourage high expectations, and then suddenly something happens and everything comes down, and we are back to square one. So given this environment, to talk about creating a new paradigm is not that easy, and obviously it warrants patience and perseverance in order for us to move forward. Now, Ambassador Kaju would bear me out that, and so many here in the audience as well, the diplomat by training, they're optimists. Because if we lose optimism, then obviously there is nothing to work for, and that optimism is important for us to create diplomatic space, however the adversarial relation may be. And as one a former president of Ghana defined diplomacy as the art of accepting the feasible in order to advance the desirable. So this is, I think, one of the best definitions of diplomacy, and this provides us a very sound template as to how two countries which are whose relations are beset by conflict, mistrust, can move forward. And as I said earlier, our job is to create diplomatic space, to build bridges, to see as to what avenues are available for cooperation, and take things forward. I think we can create a new paradigm between our two countries, provided, and that is again in general terms, if we have mutual sincerity of purpose and reciprocity. That to me are the two fundamental elements which may at times appear intangible, but in my view these two things provide the basis for Pakistan and India to move forward. But before I build a case for creating a new paradigm, I think it would be worthwhile just to mention about two sets of popular narrative, one in India and one in Pakistan. I know that you all are aware as to what the narrative on Pakistan is in India. But I will mention a few things in order to take the discussion forward. At this stage, we're not talking about whether this narrative is right or wrong, partially right or wrong, or in their entirety. But let's see as what the narrative is in India on Pakistan. And I'm not saying that this narrative is believed by everyone or subscribed to by everyone. But this is the general popular narrative which I have come across during the last 3-4 months of my stay in New Delhi. First is that Pakistan is perhaps an historical aberration. Islam, religion, or any other Islam, or for that matter, any other religion cannot be a force to create a nation. And the creation of Bangladesh was testimony to this. And Pakistan, after independence, for its own omissions, descended into a security-oriented state, and that somehow continues to this day. Pakistan is almost a failing state. And the democracy which we have in Pakistan is more or less a sham democracy. Army, ISI, they still call the shots in Pakistan. Especially when it comes to India, the democratic government or the civilian government has no say. Taliban were created by Pakistan, and now inevitably it has become a monster for Pakistan itself. And we do not know as to how to put this genie back into the bottle. Pakistan has safe havens for terrorists and militants. And terrorism, in fact, is used as a state tool, and especially in Jammu and Kashmir. And Pakistan is also using dilatory tactics when it comes to Mumbai trial. There is no interest in resolving that problem. And Pakistan continues also to support outfits like SIMI, SIMI, or Indian Mujahideen. And Pakistan is also engaged in counterfeit currency to destabilize or create problems for Indian economy and so on and so forth. And when it comes to Afghanistan, Pakistan wants the Taliban to take over there because Pakistan still considers Afghanistan as part of its strategic depth. And Hindus or other minorities in Pakistan are facing huge problems, and there is no tolerance vis-a-vis minorities in our country. Pakistan is also playing games when it comes to extending MFN status to India, and Pakistan is not ready to walk the talk. And there is also, Pakistan is also a problem for the region as a whole, and in the global sense, it is also a problem in the context of nuclear proliferation. So this is the general, set of narrative which we have in India on Pakistan. Now let's cross over the border. In Pakistan, the popular narrative about India is not very different, but I will go through the major elements. India never accepted Pakistan or its creation. There is still very powerful elements in India who would like to undo Pakistan, because breakup of the subcontinent was directly in conflict with Hindu faith, so to put it in simple words. So the subcontinent has to be reunited.
India never loses an opportunity to damage Pakistan. And what happened in Bangladesh was one example as how and to what extent India can go to damage Pakistan or destabilize Pakistan. And now, even today, India is creating problems for us, especially in the province of Balochistan and the FATA region, by using Afghanistan territory. So Pakistan continues to be India's main occupation. India is a big country, regional big brother, so to say, but unfortunately or fortunately, it doesn't go along well with any of its neighbors. India has problems with Pakistan, it has problems with Bangladesh, it has problems with Sri Lanka, and so on and so forth. So India wants to become a hegemon, and the recent invitation to SAARC leaders by Prime Minister Modi to attend his oath-taking ceremony is seen in that context by some people in Pakistan. India claims to be the largest democracy in the world, but then it is not ready to listen to the aspirations of the 12-15 million people of Jammu and Kashmir. India denies them the right to self-determination. So there are inherent flaws in Indian democracy. After 9/11, India tried to portray the Jammu and Kashmir struggle, legitimate struggle, which was committed to them by both India and Pakistan and the international community, and India committed to UN resolutions. India tried to portray that legitimate struggle as terrorism. And India is also not serious about resolving the core issues like Jammu and Kashmir, Siachen, Sar Creek, and it tends to cherry pick issues which are of interest to India, like trade, or for that matter terrorism, or Mumbai trial, or 4 Ts they're called in Pakistan: terrorism, trade, trial, and transit through Pakistan to have trade with Afghanistan. India also violates Indus Waters Treaty of 1960, and that has the potential to become a big problem between our two countries. India's secularism is also a farce because Muslims in India continue to face huge problems, and the recent elections showed in some way that despite the fact that there are 13 to 14% of the population, their representation in the parliament in Lok Sabha is not more than 4%. So now these two narratives, and you can see how diametrically opposite they are. Now, politically speaking, these two narratives make, for our leaders, a very limited space to work. Because in democracy, it is very difficult to do things which are not endorsed, generally speaking, by the people of the country. And you will agree with me that the world of the 21st century is without a question a world of constant and rapidly increasing change in many areas of life. Biotechnology and information and communications technologies are kind of rewriting the rule book in large areas of our life and raising new and ever new, more pressing questions, both normative and political. Now, South Asia, unfortunately, is the only region in the world
which is the least integrated region economically,
whereas 1/5 of the world population lives here. If you see intra-regional trade, for example, intra-EU trade, that is 55% of their global trade. ASEAN intra-trade is around 22%. And in South Asia, intra-SAARC trade is close to 5%. Whereas millions of people in Pakistan and India continue to live below the proverbial poverty line. We are facing massive challenges related to poverty, education or illiteracy, disease, you name anything. We have serious issues on hands. So, given this problem or these challenges, I think for the first time in Pakistan and India's history, we have two prime ministers, two leaders, whose vision is almost, mirror image of each other. When our prime minister took over last year, he articulated, defined his vision by 3 words as the peaceful development. And his region first vision was the basis of his overtures towards India. And we did try, he tried his level best that the former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, visit Pakistan, but that never happened. But when he received an invitation from Prime Minister-elect Mr. Modi, he made it a point to attend the ceremony, overtaking ceremony, despite opposition from some quarters in Pakistan. Here too, as we have seen, Prime Minister Modi's foremost priority is development and growth, economic growth. And we have also seen that he is spending, his focus is on the region. And he would like to create more and more opportunities for the region to develop as a whole. So for the first time, two prime ministers with reasonably good mandate are in power and who realize that how important it is for this region to get economically integrated, to have more and more regional connectivity. How unfortunate it is that there is no direct air connection between Islamabad and New Delhi. PIA flies thrice a week, I believe, but there is no Indian airline flying to Pakistan. Then there are very, very limited possibilities to travel to and fro by road, or there are hardly any possibilities. So the meeting between our two leaders on the 27th of May provided us a good opportunity to establish, to resume our contacts, bilateral contacts, and to start addressing our bilateral challenges. At this point, I would slightly, before I talk further about this meeting, I would just like to take you back to Pakistan. Pakistan, as you all know, is a big country of almost 200 million people. And despite humongous regional challenges or our internal challenges, during the Cold War, after the Cold War, and post-Cold War, we have done reasonably well economically. At one stage, Pakistan was far ahead, even China and India, because we were growing at the rate of 8 to 9%. and we were considered as the rising economic tiger of South Asia. But unfortunately, since 1979, the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan engendered huge problems for us. And we are, even today, are fighting with the legacies of that long war in Afghanistan. At one stage, Pakistan was hosting over 5 million Afghan refugees, and even today, there are close to 3 million Afghan refugees in Pakistan. And we are looking after them despite our own resources. There is no UNHCR assistance, and we are doing it since it is our moral duty to do that as a neighbor of Afghanistan. So the West, after 1990, left both Pakistan and Afghanistan high and dry. And we were left to deal with the harsh legacies of the long war in Afghanistan. And then 9/11 happens. And remember that not a single Pakistani was involved in that horrific tragedy. Since then, terrorism has continued, and especially since 2004. The suicide bombings in Pakistan, because of that, we have lost over 52,000 of our innocent civilians. According to a World Bank report, Pakistan's economy suffered over $100 billion of losses in the last 10 years. And we have lost over 5,000 of our security personnel. This is a number which is really a tragedy from our perspective. So given this, Afghanistan is very, very, very important for us. You may accuse us of interfering in Afghanistan or creating the Taliban, but I can tell you that today there is no desire in Pakistan to interfere in Afghanistan in any way. As a people, we are tired of this long war in Afghanistan, because as I said earlier, it has affected us in many, many ways. It has destroyed our economy, it has damaged FDI in Pakistan, it has stopped our economic growth, our industrialization. It has damaged in many ways our social fabric. I come from Peshawar, and I know how Afghan refugees have really created so many problems for my city. So that is, Afghanistan is one issue which is, we believe, is a sine qua non for stability and growth in Pakistan. So we are very much interested to see stability in that country, because what is good for Afghanistan is also good for Pakistan. And what is good for Afghanistan has to be decided by the people of Afghanistan themselves. I think we have learned the hard way that the people of Afghanistan in the past, perhaps by the international community as a whole, have been treated, or Afghanistan itself has been treated as a place for proxy wars. But I think the time has now come, and we strongly realize in Pakistan that we would not interfere in Afghanistan, and we strongly believe that other neighboring countries or immediate neighbors or distant neighbors would also not interfere in Afghanistan. So we are very much looking forward to good results. The elections have taken place. There are now issues, but we hope that the election results will be accepted by the two candidates, and Afghanistan will move forward on the road to prosperity and stability. Inside Pakistan, I think you all know that despite many a disruption, Pakistan is now finally back on the democratic path. For the first time in Pakistan's history,
power was transferred from one elected government to another elected government, and that in itself, from our standpoint, was a big achievement. Meanwhile, despite despotism, dictatorships, if you visit Pakistan, you will immediately notice that Pakistan has come a long, long way. Our civil society is very, very strong, and you will find advocacy groups in every sphere of life. Our media is robust, though yet to come of age, but for some, you know, it is too wild. But I think it is part of the democratic process. And as we move forward, it will understand and be professional in the years to come. But our media is very strong, critiquing the government 24/7 on any issue. I remember there were issues which were taboo, couldn't be discussed publicly. But now nothing is beyond the realm of public discussion. And that is the best thing which happened to Pakistan in the last 10 or so years. Then our judiciary has become independent, which is again a very interesting development. And now one cannot take judiciary for a ride. So this all shows our inherent resilience. And then on the international level, Pakistan has been very active in the foreign policy realm, and Pakistan continues to strive for a fair and just international order, international system, and our contribution to UN peacekeeping missions. Pakistan is the largest country which contributes troops to peacekeeping missions around the world. So that shows how actively we are engaged in the world to contribute to peace and security around the globe. Now let me return to PM's, our two Prime Ministers meeting. The meeting was held in a very cordial atmosphere, I can tell you that, because I was in that meeting. And the two Prime Ministers, in my personal view, they, right from the word go, they felt very easy with each other, and even shared some poetry, Bulle Shah and others. So the meeting was very, very, I think, constructive and positive. Subsequently, the two Prime Ministers exchanged letters, and those letters also were very positive and constructive. Now we are in the process of implementing the decisions taken by our two Prime Ministers, our two leaders, and we hope that the engagement process would resume as soon as possible. You would agree with me that between stimulus and responses, we have the freedom to choose. Now it is for us to make a choice. So here I would like to underline 4 or 5 things which should help, if not creating a new paradigm, but at least, and I do not know if we really do need a new paradigm, paradigm in the sense that we do need to come together, resolve our problems, resolve our issues. But I think 3 or 4 things would be important in this context. First is that despite wars and conflicts between our two countries, we have made significant progress in many areas. I mentioned about the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty, which was mediated by the World Bank. And that treaty provides, and that is being kind of implemented, that is respected by both the countries. And there's so many other agreements. For example, the 1974 a protocol on pilgrims' visits to each other countries. There have been MOUs on pre-notification of ballistic missile tests. Then we have had so many CBMs, cross-LOC CBMs, CBMs, trade-related CBMs. So there's so many things which we have done despite our mistrust, mutual mistrust problems. So the first thing is that whatever we have agreed upon, or whatever agreement, MOUs, CBMs exist, those need to be observed, adhered to in letter and spirit. I think that would help the two countries to build further momentum and inject further momentum into our bilateral relationship. There are areas, there are some agreements which are not perhaps implemented in their true letter and spirit, but I think adhering to those agreements, MOUs, CBMs would be important in order to move forward. And I think this was also underlined by our two leaders during their meeting in New Delhi. Second, that we cannot shy away from having a comprehensive dialogue. Now you may call it a composite dialogue or a comprehensive dialogue, whatever name is given to that dialogue, it has to be a comprehensive one. And when I say comprehensive one, it doesn't mean that we are giving precedence to or priority to one particular area. What we are trying to say is that all issues are important. Terrorism is perhaps more important for us than to India, because we are the greatest victim of terror in this part of the region. So we would also like to discuss terrorism, but at the same time we cannot overlook the issues which continue to bedevil our relations. We cannot put aside the Jammu and Kashmir issue. We cannot put aside terrorism or Siachen or Sar Creek or other issues. So we need to have a comprehensive dialogue process. And it is our expectation that when our two foreign secretaries meet, they will take a comprehensive stock of the state of relations and then stitch up a plan of action as to how our two countries can engage in a meaningful and result-oriented process. Because if we now engage in a discussion as to how we need to move forward, whether we would like to discuss only trade, then we are unnecessarily trying to reinvent the wheel. There is a mechanism already in place which has yielded results in the past. So from our standpoint, it would be better to stick to that mechanism and let's discuss all the issues on the table. We fully understand that there are issues on which there will be progress perhaps in a month or two. On others, it will take perhaps more time, even years. We're not asking for any simultaneous progress on all the eight segments under the composite dialogue. What we are saying is, let's discuss everything as provided for under the composite dialogue, and then wherever we are making progress, that will be good for strengthening the dialogue process itself, as well as creating more and more trust between our two countries. So this is the second thing which I think is important, that we need not reinventing the wheel. Third, I think would be important that whatever is achieved, or the dialogue process first of all itself, has to be made irreversible and uninterruptible. Because the pattern, the bilateral pattern which we have between our two countries is that if something happens on the LOC or reprehensible acts like Mumbai attack, if something happens, everything comes to a halt to a ground, as they say. So we need to get out of that syndrome. We cannot, our two countries cannot allow to continue to be hostage to those forces who do not want these two countries to get together and resolve our problems. I can tell you there are forces in Pakistan who would not like for a moment Pakistan and India to resolve their bilateral issues. And you are also aware of those forces inside India who would not like any engagement with Pakistan. So both countries do have those forces, and I think our political leaders are conscious of that fact. They realize that Pakistan and India cannot continue in a perpetual conflict. We will have to resolve our issues, and the environment which has been created by the two leaders, I personally feel augurs well for our two countries, because that meeting has, in any case, has given us some space to resume the dialogue process and make it meaningful. Now here, because I strongly believe in dialogue rather than monologue, so here I would, conclude and give more time for discussion. That, as a Swedish proverb says, that those who wish to sing always find a song. And I know that several of my Indian friends and colleagues, they do want to sing. So let us sing together. I'm not for a moment underestimating the enormity of the challenges at hand. But I think the genius, we are intelligent enough people, and the genius, the collective wisdom and genius of our two peoples can help create a new paradigm that is underpinned by mutual respect and mutual interest. And that, I think, provides the basis for our future engagement. There are issues, as I said earlier, there are challenges, but if we have the sincerity of purpose and sincerity of will, I think we can manage this relationship and transform this relationship from conflict management to conflict resolution. Thank you very much, very kindly.